What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down some big catalysts coming out for the week that are going to be very important, not to mention some new developments on the charts. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. So offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening to Tesla. So looking at the way Tesla was moving for the last couple of trading days, we formed a nice double top right here, rejecting off this tough resistance near this 235 area. We got this big rejection. Now, generally when you get rejections like this, we do come down to this support down here with some imbalances, and that will lead to more downside, at least for the time being for Tesla. However, we have more catalysts coming out that could affect whether or not that leads to a bounce on Tesla. So if we do dip more, will we get this big bounce or not? That's going to depend on a lot of different factors. So I want to talk about that real quick. One thing worth mentioning is that for Monday, it's going to be September 9th, 2024. At 10 o'clock a.m., we have wholesale inventories data, which tends to be very, very minor. Then at 11 o'clock a.m., we have consumer inflationary expectations, which also tends to be kind of minor, followed by a bunch of bill auctions at 11:30 a.m. Once again, I don't really expect anything too crazy because of this data. It's nothing too significant, nothing too crazy. But going into Tuesday, that's when things could get a little bit different. And here's the reason why. Tuesday is going to be September 10th, but just notes that we have the business optimism report coming out, which is also quite minor. But what's going to happen is that on Wednesday, we have CPI data coming out, and that's going to be very important. It comes out before the market opens. And over the last couple of months, what's been happening is the day before CPI, we tend to see a big increase in volatility, typically to the upside. Typically, the market starts to push a little higher once we get closer to CPI day. So there's a chance the market may rebound a little bit in anticipation of CPI, as the market tends to be more optimistic. And a lot of the times, these market makers, institutions, they know what the data is going to look like already, so they might see a lot more of a positive reaction. Who knows, guys? But that is what tends to happen. That's what's been happening for the almost the entire year. So there's a good chance the market may attempt to rebound either by the end of the day on Monday, if not by Tuesday. There might be a little bit of a rebound attempt approaching CPI. And then whether or not the market continues lower or if it gets a big bounce will be dependent on CPI data. So that's what I think is going to play out for the week. We start off pretty weak on Monday, then we attempt to rebound either by Monday or if not by Tuesday. And then CPI will be the next big factor affecting us. But that's what I think is going to likely pan out for the broader markets. When it comes to other factors, please note that right now, fear is what's driving the markets. There's a lot of fear right now involving price action, involving many different, economic pieces of data, and we're still seeing this affecting sentiment. On top of this, momentum is still at fear because we're getting very close to this key support. The S&P 500 is approaching the 125 daily moving average. Once we get close to that, we'll see if we get a bounce or not. But that's going to be a key support for us. And then the puts and call option ratios at extreme fear. When we hit these extreme levels, we do have a tendency of seeing the market essentially form these bottoms. We're not really ready yet. This could still continue a little bit higher, but I presume that the higher this goes, the more likely it is that the market will find a bottom very soon. So get ready for that, at least temporarily. And then volatility is also at neutral right now. The VIX is still looking bullish. There's no sign of it rejecting it, so give it some time. This is what the earnings calendar looks like for the markets. We have Oracle's earnings on Monday. For Tuesday, we have GameStop and a few others, like a lot of retail, like Petco. And then for Wednesday, we have Manchester United, not to mention Big Lots on Thursday. So this is what the earnings calendar looks like. Nothing too crazy. As far as Tesla goes, there's been a lot of talk about how they're launching the world's first all-electric Giga train with incredible passenger capacity, and it's free to ride. Very, very cool stuff. It's basically completely battery powered. It debuted in Germany, which is great news for Tesla, if anything. And it's going to be able to transport as many as 500 people with 120 seats in total, with spaces for bicycles and etc. So I'm seeing a lot of talk about this. It's eventually expected to transport over 4,500 employees to and from the Gigafactory in Berlin. So very, very cool stuff. I think it's great that Tesla is kind of like accommodating a lot of standards in like Europe, because here in the US, things are very different. Americans tend to drive cars. Trains are not as popular, but in Europe, that is like the norm. So of course, Tesla is doing what's best for them. And then this could also be a lot more better for the environment in a lot of ways. So cool stuff, if anything. There's also been a lot of talk about their AI product roadmap. I think that's pretty awesome for Tesla. There still might be some talk about this. Musk was tweeting about this on his Twitter page, but basically, Tesla is going to be looking for new FSD updates and other updates to the AI computer for very, very big changes that are going to be coming. They're also going to be looking for lots of upgrades as well for smart summon features and then auto parking and a bunch of things like that. This is all going to be coming in anticipation of the FSD event and the Robotaxi events for October. So there's going to be a lot of updates coming, pretty cool stuff, followed by FSD potentially launching in Europe in Q1 of 2025. Musk specified it may be late Q1 of 2025, so FSD in Europe and China. They're waiting for regulatory approval, excuse me. And then Musk was saying hopefully it happens near the end of Q1, if not by early Q2 of 2025. Just want to specify that. So that's pretty much it for news about Tesla. I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy. Volume is currently at about this 112 million area, which is not bad whatsoever. But we're sinking on high volume. So, volume has been going up for the last couple of days. Morgan Stanley gave Tesla an overweight rating. So did GLJ Research. And then we also have a tendency of seeing the price price ratio following Tesla. So it's going down a bit. Tesla lost some strength, but we'll see how we end up reacting to some key supports. Mondays tend to be green about 53% of the time. Tuesdays are also green about 51% of the time. And we tend to see more volatility around 9 a.m. and also around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll see how things end up going. With that being said, guys, let's talk about what's happening with Tesla. So just so we're very, very clear, we're looking a little bit more bearish right now on the 4-hour time frame. And we have a bearish looking daily close, which generally leads us to more downside. So I think we might dip a little bit more for Tesla. We're at this support where this yellow trend line happens to be. But I think that whether we get a bounce or not depends on different factors. It is still possible we retest this like imbalance area at this 208 zone. If not around 205, I think we could dip a little bit more. Then we might be looking for buyers to defend it later into Monday, if not by Tuesday, to try to get us back above this yellow trend line. So I think that's what's going to most likely happen to Tesla. We have resistance at 212 and then 215, followed by 217. Our support to watch for is going to be around this 210 area. If that fails us, we're looking for 208, followed by 205. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla dips a bit before we see some buyers defend it and try to push it back above that trend line. That's what I think is the most likely possibility. So for now, we are bearish. There might be a little bit more downside coming, but watch and see where we base. I think that it may happen early for the week, and there might be some increases in volatility by the time we get to Tuesday. Now, another factor for Tesla is going to be the news. I can't always predict the news, but I can tell you that that's going to be something worth mentioning, and we'll see how things end up going with that. But for now, look for a little bit more downside for the broader markets, look for downside for Tesla, and then we'll see if we get a bounce. I'll be watching that very, very carefully. For other factors out there, we also have SPY. SPY is also on a bit of a downtrend right now. We have resistance at this 540 area, not to mention 543. Our supports at 536 and 534. I think SPY could dip a little bit lower. One thing worth mentioning is that we could dip towards that next gap fill, which takes us down to about 534. It is possibly dip a little bit more. But I think that we're going to try to base very close to where we are. We could be getting close to 536 to 534 and then try to rebound. And part of why I say that is because we're testing the weekly 20 EMA. So we have the 20 EMA, this green line here at 538. I have a feeling that there may be an attempt to defend this, meaning we might dip below it to start off the week, hitting like the mid 530s. Sure, it's a possibility, but then there might be buyers coming back up towards the end of the week, maybe after CPI, to try to get us back up at 538 to close above that, to start a little rally, maybe approaching the FOMC meeting. That could be what's about to happen. Now, I don't know for sure, but the best thing to do is just watch your levels. But I think the most likely possibility is that we dip a little bit more. We come down towards this mid 530 area if 538 does not hold us. And then we're looking for a little rebound back up to about 543 or so. So watch for that very, very carefully. For ES, I'm seeing something very similar. This is still looking more bearish on the 4-hour time frame as we're losing these supports. But I think that 5,400 is going to be one main support. If that fails us, we're looking for 5,380. It's about 5,350 as our main support zones. And then we'll be watching to see if we get a rebound off one of these levels. But for now, ES is bearish. We might dip a little bit lower towards these support zones down here before we see another rebound attempt back up towards the mid 5,400 area. So look for a little bit more downside. We could dip another 50 points. We could be coming back down towards 5380 to 5350 before we see a rebound attempt. So watch for that very, very carefully. For Nvda, I'm seeing the same thing developing. We have kind of like a symmetrical structure right up here as we're making lower highs and lower lows. we're going to try to base very soon. Now, we could be dipping all the way down towards this imbalance, taking us down to 99. I think between 95 and 100, we're going to try to base. We might dip a little bit lower, but then we'll be watching to see if we get a rebound attempt. The PPO is looking a little bit more promising, but I think what's going to happen is we kind of dip lower down here towards 99 before we see some buyers defend it, and they may push it back up towards the 108s to 100. So that's what I think Nvidia is going to do. We dip a little bit more towards these support zones in, either between 95 to the low 100s, then there could be a rebound coming. We could start to establish a bullish divergence, and that does give us some potential. For Bitcoin, I see two possibilities. Bitcoin might be looking for a little bit of a dip, and we'll see if we establish a higher low or not. But we do love to get bought up between 50 and 52,000. So either we dip and establish a higher low and start pushing back up like this to 55,000, or if we establish a lower low, if we end up losing this low, we could be coming down to like the 50,000 area before we see another rebound attempt back up like this. So it's got to be one of these two possibilities. Make sure you watch where Bitcoin bases. Do we establish a higher low compared to this low right here and then try to rebound back up to 55,000? Or do we come down to this support zone before we try to rebound? Watch for that very, very carefully. For NQ, we have resistance around this 18,500 area to watch for, followed by 18,700. Our main support to watch for is at 18,250, not to mention 18,000 flat. So I think that NQ is looking more bearish as we're making lower highs and lower lows, and there's a chance we might be dipping towards 18,250, just a little bit lower towards the lower 18,000 area. But then once we enter the zone, there might be a rebound attempts to come off these key fib levels. So I think there's a chance that a rebound could come, but we might dip a little bit lower first. We might dip a little bit lower first before we see that rebound attempt. Might be a little bit more downside coming to the markets, as right now we look bearish, but then we'll be looking for that bounce by Tuesday. So that's what my view is. We dip a little bit more towards these imbalances, towards this main support zone before we try to bounce. So I'll be watching for that very carefully. For the QQQ, I think that we could be dipping closer to about 445. If that does not hold us, we're looking for a move all the way down to the low 440s. We'll have to see if we base around there. If not, I think that we're just going to make a symmetrical structure and kind of like get to the mid 430s before we get the bounce. So for now, we're looking at 445. We might dip a little bit below that to get closer to 440 before we try to bounce. And we'll see if 440 is the area, if not a little bit below that. But I think we're going to dip a little bit more before we get that bounce. So we'll see how low this goes. It's still going to dip lower, guys, so be prepared for that for the QQQ. The resistance to watch for is at 448 and 450, not to mention 453. But I presume 445, not to mention the low 440s, are coming before we try to see a rebound attempt. So watch for that very carefully on the QQQ. For Apple, we have resistance to watch for at 222 and 223.8. And we have support to watch for at 218. I presume we're going to be dipping down to about the 218 area, and then we'll see if we bounce off that or not. I think we might be dipping a little bit lower, and we'll see if the rebound comes. So watch for that as well very, very carefully. Look for more downside before we attempt to bounce, and that's going to be very, very key for the next main levels. For a few more out there, I just want to mention that Palantir is showing some life. It's trying to rebound right now, but we do have some tough resistance approaching near 33. So it could hit this 33 area. If it does reject here, we could retest 32 before trying to bounce higher. But this has potential. So we will see how this ends up going. For others out there, we also have Supermicro. In my personal opinion, I think that Supermicro is looking a little bit weak right now. So please be very mindful of that. But I think that it's very important to note that despite this like downside that's forming on Supermicro, the issue is with being too bearish is that we're forming a bullish divergence. So I think it could dip a little bit more, get closer to about the 360 area if 380 fails us, maybe even the mid 350s, when there should be a rebound back into the 400s coming. So there might be a little bit more downside than a rebound off this bullish divergence. So I'll be watching for this very, very carefully. For Rivian, we're just range bound right now. We could retest 13.5 and start dipping back down for this gap fill all the way down to about 12.8. Then we'll see if we bounce off that or not. So we'll see how Rivian ends up doing. Might pop a little bit, then start dipping down after grabbing liquidity back down to the 12.8 area. Every time we hit 12.8, we do like to bounce, so it might hit that and try to rebound again. So look for a little bit more downside potential in this. For SoFi, we're looking a little bit more bearish right now, continuing to fall. We're looking at the 7 area as our main support. If this does not hold us, we could be dipping all the way down towards 6.8 before we try to rebound. But for now, SoFi is looking a little bit more bearish to me. It might dip a little bit more before we attempt to rebound back up towards 7.2. So look for more downside initially. For the IWM Russell 2000, we are making lower highs and lower lows. We're continuing to reject, so we are still looking quite bearish, in my opinion. We're looking at this resistance around 208, not to mention 210. Our main support is going to be at 206, not to mention 204. I think what could happen is, as we're making lower highs and lower lows, we could be dipping towards 204 to 206 into this range. Then we could be looking for a rebound after that. But for now, we do look a little bit more bearish. So watch for that very, very carefully. We might be dipping closer to about the 204s. I think that the IWM is due for a rebound. We might dip a little bit more first before that move ends up coming. So watch for that very, very carefully. On AMD, we're rejecting off this trend line again and again and again. So I think that the move right now is that we might attempt to hit this and then reject again, dip a little bit lower, and then to really bounce, you want to see it try to break this resistance, get back above this, and maybe try to break like 136. That's what you want to see for this thing to actually bounce. So it might continue lower temporarily before we make an attempt to rebound later into the week. But we need to break this trend line for confirmation. As long as we don't do that, the trend remains bearish on AMD. Same thing with ARM. We still have a bearish trend. We're making lower highs and lower lows. We could be retesting 120, then rejecting, continuing to dip lower before we attempt to rebound. This support is going to be very key at this 115 area. So we'll see if this holds. If we don't hold this, I think we might be dumping quite a bit back down to like the 108s. So we might rebound to about 120, then reject and retest 115. If it does not hold, we're going to be looking for a bigger dump on AMD. If it does hold, we could rebound. So we will see, but I'm going to be very mindful and very careful. There is a risk of this dipping lower. I also want to mention that on the daily charts, we look kind of bearish right now, so this does suggest downside's coming. We could rebound a bit and start dipping towards that 10 target. So this looks like a little bit weaker compared to the market. Coinbase looks very bearish right now. It's continuing to fall. There's no sign of a bounce. I think that there's a good chance that this may continue to dip. We're going to be looking for 147 as our main support. If that fails us, we're looking for basically 145 and 138. So this looks a little bit more bearish for the time being before he attempts to rebound. So look for more downside potential in coin for the lower 140s before we try to bounce. Amazon has an inverse cup and handle like structure. I could be looking for this to dip towards 168 to 169. Then we could rebound back into like the 170s. But I think that this has more downside potential. We could be looking for 168 very, very soon. For Meta, we're dipping quite a bit right now. We have 494 as a potential target. Look at 500 and 494. If 494 fails, this imbalance will fill towards 490. Look for a little bit more downside between 494 and 490. If 500 does not hold, then we could rebound later on to get back to resistance at 506. So it might dip a little bit more than try to rebound, so watch for that. For Microsoft, we're looking a little bit more bearish. We have a gap to fill around 394. If we fill that gap, we could rebound. If not, we could dip lower. So I presume that if 400 does not hold, we're looking for 394. Then we'll see how we end up moving from there. For Google, we look a little bit more bearish. We're looking for 150 as a potential target. If that fails us, we're looking for 148 and 145. Might dip towards these lower levels before we try to rebound back to about 155. So look for a little bit more downside moving forward. For DJT, I just want to mention that this is attempting to base right now, but we could be retesting 16.5 before he attempts to get back up. So I'll be watching for that very, very carefully. For a few more, we also have the VIX. It looks bullish for now, but I think that there could be a big shift in this depending on how CPI goes. CPI may also affect our yields, which ends up affecting interest rates. So I'll be watching to see what this leads to. This could continue to dip as the Fed is projected to give us a cut soon. And the dollar has a nice inverse head and shoulders. We're watching to see if this bounces. It looks a little bit bullish. It might push a little higher as the market dips. So my view of the market is we might dip lower for Tesla, SPY, and the others. However, the market should be forming a base soon. It should base very, very soon. And there should be a rebound coming maybe later into Monday. Late Monday, if not by early Tuesday, the market should attempt a little rebound after we dip even more. That's what my general view of the market is. With that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. We have big catalysts coming up for the markets very soon. We're a little bit over a month away from the robotaxi event for Tesla. It's going to be a big catalyst. That's about a little bit over 4 weeks from now. So I can't wait to see how things go with that. And I just want to say, guys, the future is still very bright despite what we're seeing for the short term. So I thank you all so much for listening. Please have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are. Enjoy the rest of your weekend for whatever's left of it. And take care, guys. I'll be back on Monday before the market ends up opening to give you guys another update. Until then, please have a great weekend. And remember, something very important about the markets is that the charts could adjust all the time. One day the market could be looking very bullish. Next day we could look bearish. But the best thing I will do is just try my best to be as unbiased as possible and tell you what the charts suggest. The majority of the time, they are, accurate. They are right most of the time. But I will do the best I can, no matter how volatile the market tends to be and how crazy things get. All right. So have a great weekend. I'll see you guys very soon, and peace out.